I was born in New York City in the Bronx. I don't know where the hospital was. It was in the Bronx or Manhattan. Very long time ago. My father's parents died in a flu epidemic in Europe. And I think he was a teenager at the time. He was raised by his older sisters. And my mother's oldest brother came first. And then his second oldest brother came. And they opened butcher stores. And between the two of them, they managed to bring the rest of the family over. There's a story. My mother was the youngest, and my father's sister, they were all very short. So they took my mother's passport and used it for my aunt. And they passed the passports from one to another so that they could all come over, and whatever the technicalities were, I don't know. But families were sort of close because they knew each other well. And my aunt settled in Newark, New Jersey, and they had a paint store. And we used to go out to visit them on Sunday, and I remember it would take 2 hours on the subway, because you had to change trains and so forth and go to Jersey, and it was a big trip. What else? The older brothers did extremely well. From the butcher shops, they bought real estate and were quite wealthy. My one uncle took a trip around the world. So that's how well they did.
I think, didn't he go to India?
He took a trip around the world.
But
he went everywhere.
India, exotic lands.
Right, and he was gone for several months. My mother had 4 sisters who all lived in the same apartment building, more or less. And it was just super growing up, because if you didn't find your mother, or if you didn't like what your mother told you, you could go to an aunt and she would give you the right answer. Believe me.
I was born in New York City. I think it was Manhattan, but I don't know. And it was 1932. My grandmother, on my father's side, came from Romania. They lived in the Lower East Side. And I have a funny story about our family name, because her married name was Hood. And when she moved to the Lower East Side, she felt that that wasn't Jewish enough. So she just took her maiden name, which was Goldstein. Never had it legally changed or anything. And part of the family, we never met them or anything, but part of the family was Hood and part of the family was Goldstein.
They also lived in a small area, very close together. His mother was a truly remarkable person. During the war, they operated a ready-to-wear store. It was a ladies' specialty. I mean, they carried almost everything. They had underwear and jewelry and sportswear.
Intimate apparel.
Yeah. And of course, they had no money. And they were, at that time, there were huge shortages during the war, and you couldn't get merchandise. So she would take cash and go down to the garment industry, and she would pay in cash so that they would give her some goods to sell. And during the war, she supported her sister.
Well, the store, the family.
The
store supported everybody in the family on that
But
side.
she ran the store.
Yeah.
She was the one who financially ran the store and wanted to expand, but his father was very afraid and didn't allow it.
Well, they were born they lived in the Depression, and they lived in the Depression at that time, and I'm trying to turn it off so it won't bother us again. They had no money whatsoever. My father did many things in terms of jobs. He was a piano tuner. He worked in factories. He did all sorts of different things to make a living. And when they opened the store, they had absolutely no money whatsoever. My mother would go down and speak to these credit people, and beg them for $50 worth of credit, which she would get, from different companies, and that's how they began to get money, and they suffered and worked in the store. The store was in there was a movie theater in the building with the store, and they would stay open until after the theater would close at night, 10, 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night. At that time they showed late movies in New York, just as maybe they could catch a customer. I started working in the store when I was 6 years old. Christmas, of course, was a major time, and I would stay in the back and make boxes for the gift boxes. And I was born and raised in the store. That's where I became familiar with retailing, and I loved it and I enjoyed it. And I worked in the store all during high school and during college, and even after we got married, because I couldn't get a job when we got married. The Korean War was on, and nobody would hire me because they thought I was going to go into service. So I worked in the store until finally I was declared 4F and I could get a job, and at that point I left the store.
Growing up in New York was just super. It was just such a fun city. And I always wonder how my mother let me do a lot of the things that we did, because we had extreme freedom to go to Manhattan, to go wherever. I mean, I took a class when I was in high school that was not in a good neighborhood. I had to change trains, and I was in high school at the time, and I had to, but when I think back, and I think, I would not let my children do that. So it was, even though there was a lot of crime, there was a lot of freedom for us growing up. And it was something that we truly enjoyed.
Did you grow up?
Maybe not. A very difficult time was, my mother died when I was
16.
And she got sick when I was 17, and she died, I was barely 19. I had just become 19. And so that was an extremely horrible time. She had cancer, and then people just, it was such a shanda, people just didn't mention the word. And I really didn't understand why she was so ill and what was wrong with her. And she went from several doctors to she had some tests taken and things of that kind, but so she was sick for about a year and a half or so, and then the last 3 months she was hospitalized, and she was Mount Sinai, wasn't it? She was in the hospital, and most of that time she was in a coma.
Or slow kettering. Wasn't it? Slow kettering.
Something like that.
But your family was very secretive, and they never,
And they were, and so I really didn't know what was wrong, and I didn't understand that she was that ill. I really didn't. And
we were very seriously dated. We dated very, very seriously that time. And I remember telling Yvette, I don't know if you recall at that time, I told her how ill her mother was and that she was dying. And she really didn't
because
have
I really didn't.
comprehension
I did not know that. So that was not a very happy time. It was not a good time, and it took years to recover from that. Other things.
Well, as a child, you had a good child.
Yes,
you had a great child.
Younger. One of my aunts had another boy, and his name was Walter, and he and my brother Jerry were very close. They were 2 months apart, and so they spent a good deal of time together, those two. And I really spent a lot of time with, I had an older cousin, and she was 2 years older than I was, and so the ages were much more compatible. And as I say, we were all in a group, all of the aunt's children.
It was like a group home.
Right, all grew up, more or less together.
I had a very nice childhood. At that time, the store was doing better, and the family was, a little more affluent, and we were very comfortable. and my sister and I, as I said, were brought up with a maid in the house all the time because my mother worked full time in the store. And I had a very, very nice childhood. I had all sorts of toys. I had all sorts of things. I remember I had a big fire engine. I used to ride up and down the street. And I had a bicycle when I was 6. We had a house, an apartment, and there were French doors with glass panels to my parents' bedroom. And we were playing in the house, and we were running up and down the hall, and I tripped and I fell. And I put my arm out to stop myself, and my arm went through the glass door, and very, very severely cut my right arm. And I was bleeding profusely. Unfortunately, my aunt was in the house, and she put a tourniquet on. Took me. You know, I have a clock. I mean, took me downstairs. There was a fruit market we were on the second floor, a fruit market on the first floor. And they had a delivery truck, and we lived right near a hospital. And they threw me in the delivery truck and took me to the hospital. And fortunately, at the hospital, there happened to be a police surgeon who was there. And they immediately operated on me. My arm was in a cast. They had no idea if I'd ever have use of the arm. And they also thought even if I had use of the arm, it would be very limited, and they didn't expect me to have much of a recovery on the arm. I was very fortunate to that extent. Other than that, my childhood was very, very nice. My parents took us out. I went to camp once, or twice. I didn't like camp at all. I remember as a baby or as a young boy, my sister would dress me up with her friends in girls' clothing because they thought that was fun, and that's what they did with me. Sunday, the store was closed, and we used to go out. We always went to a restaurant Sunday night. We would go to downtown to the Lower East Side. We would go to Ratner's, or we would go to a Chinese restaurant, and things of this type. And it generally was a very, very nice childhood. I have a sister. She's 3.5 years older than I am. Extremely bright, very intellectual. Not too much common sense. She got married very, very young, and had a child very, very young. And she got divorced after a few years of marriage.
Well, the boy, Sandy, was 2.5.
Yeah, she got divorced right away. My parents really raised her son because he was, 2 years old, and they basically raised him. She went back to school, and she graduated college, and went to work as a teacher. Has always been involved with theater, going to theater and going to musical performances and artistic things of this type. She currently lives by herself. She has an apartment in the East Side in Manhattan, Upper East Side. She currently is not overly well, although she is living by herself at the present time and managing and doing everything by herself. But she has dementia, and she has Alzheimer's, but she still is functioning at this point. My father was a kidder, and I had an uncle, Uncle Eddie, who was a kidder, the two of them. And growing up, they did lots of funny things together. Once we were in a car on the West Side Highway in New York, and at that time the toll booth charged 10 cents, and they had an automatic machine. You just threw the dime in. And my uncle was in the back of the car, and he says to my father, "Harry, I'll throw it in, you go ahead." And so he stops, and he opens the window, and he says, "Go ahead, Harry, it's okay." And he never threw the money in. And my father goes through, and the sirens go off, and the police chase him and come after him and pull him over. And my father says, "What happened? What happened?" He says, "Well, I never threw it in. I wanted to see what would happen." So, and that was typical. Another time, I remember the story. There was a family friend that he was on a horse, and he really didn't know how to ride or anything, but he was on a horse. He was trotting very, very slowly with the horse, and my uncle goes up with a stick and hits the horse in the rear end, and the horse takes off, with him. So, you know, they did all sorts of stupid
And
things.
the eggs.
The eggs. Another time, yeah, I remember we were running and we came to a farm. And they wanted to see what the farm was like, and they had chickens. So they went into the chicken house and they took some eggs. And the farmer came. So they were hiding. So they were hiding behind bushes, and they bent down, and all the eggs broke in their pocket.
You know, my mother certainly kept a kosher home and all of that until she got sick, and then she just, well, everything kind of slid by, and but I didn't know that there was any other way to live. I thought that's all there is. Everybody was Jewish, absolutely everybody. The school teachers were all Jewish. The shopkeepers, the people that you associated with in your apartment building, on your street, all the kids, everybody was Jewish. In fact, the only person I know of I think he was Irish, was the superintendent.
I was going to say the janitor.
Yeah, he was the super. I mean, but absolutely. So it was and I didn't even understand that. I mean, I just thought that's the way the world is, right? Until I went to college. I went to Fashion Institute of Technology, which was downtown in Manhattan, and that's where I met a whole diverse group of people, other people as well, and began to understand that Judaism was not the center of the world, the way I had previously thought, and so that was really, and there was no television, you know what I mean? It was just like you just went through life thinking that everybody else was the same as you. So there were really no outside influences the way there are today. I remember when I first started to date Bernard, and he took me to a Chinese restaurant. I had no idea what any of that was. And they served finger bowls, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I watched everybody else at the table, and I saw that they were putting their hands in it, because I thought at first it was a soup and you were supposed to drink it. But I was very clever, and so when I saw them put their fingers in it, I kind of understood somewhat. But I really was quite sheltered. Everything around me was Jewish. Everything that I understood was Jewish. In fact, we lived in this one neighborhood, and the synagogue was like 2 blocks away or something like that. And years ago, we got a cousin of Bernard's to take us back to the Bronx, just to see what happened to it and what it looked like. And then I went to see this synagogue where it was such a beautiful building. I had such wonderful memories of it. Although the rabbi was very, very strict, and he used it, so there was an Orthodox congregation, they were all talking. They were always talking. There's this low buzz that's going on all the time. And he used to yell, Weiber, Shah! In other words, it was only the women that were talking, right? The men would never do such a thing. And he would always yell that. So I went to see this beautiful building that was white, pure white, and the stained glass windows and everything inside. It was just, and of course, sitting from the balcony, you could see always see the whole building from the whole interior from upstairs. And it was fenced off. There was graffiti all over it. It was really in disrepair. It was horrible. It was very, very upsetting to see what happened to that beautiful building that I had such wonderful memories from. Sitting in the balcony with my mother all the time.
But we lived in a different neighborhood, but it was like a Jewish shtetl, and didn't have. I went to Hebrew school, not all. My grandmother, my mother's mother, lived with us, and she was Orthodox. We were kosher at that time. We had a kosher home, and they spoke she could speak and understand English, but really didn't do it, and they spoke Yiddish all the time. I never learned Yiddish. It was a shortcoming of mine. It's a shame. But we didn't have a religious home at all. And other than being bar mitzvah, and other than going to synagogue on the high holidays, that was really about the only Jewish upbringing. As a matter of fact, because my parents had a retail store and Christmas was so important and all that, we had Christmas in our house. And we never had a Christmas tree or anything, but we did have Christmas. And they gave us gifts for Christmas and things of this type. So I never had any type of a Jewish background. And I really have had more of a Jewish background when we got married because of Yvette and because of the way we raised our kids and because of, you know, the life that we led. I remember I had this blind date that her cousin arranged.
Right.
And when I saw her, I looked at her and I said, that's the girl I'm going to marry. And of course, we went for a number of years and eventually got married.
Well, we got married right after my mother died. So my mother died in October and I was 19 in November. And he was all at 21. Wow, he's such a big shot.
Her mother was ill and we knew she was dying. And you can't get married for a year.
The rabbi told us, you can set a date. You know, so we set the date, and Bernard had just graduated. He graduated early so that we could get married. We graduated in January. And so in September, we picked a date in January or something like that. Because he said you could change it, you know, but you not supposed to cancel it. So, so we got married in January 31st is our anniversary.
And we had a very small wedding. We had no music. Our father did make a wedding for us in one of those wedding halls in New York City in the Bronx.
But it was a terrible wedding.
Yeah, but
it really was a very, very sad,
very sad, but
very sad wedding. My aunt was crying. It was awful.
But we did get married.
And so I think initially we lived with his parents for a couple of months until he finally got on the training program at one of the Allied department stores, and then he had a job. But I was just beginning school, so I was not working, and his first salary was $42.50 a week. And I remember thinking, gosh, if he would make $100, we would be so loaded. We would have so much money, we wouldn't know what to do. But it never worked out.
When I made $100, we had what, 2 children?
We had 2 children.
In Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Right. By the time he made $100, and
we were starving.
Yes, we were definitely starving. We would go to the grocery store, and of course Bernard figures numbers like, you know, without paper and pencil. He does all these numbers in his head. So I had to take him to the grocery store because there were no computers. I only had $20 to spend. And so he would figure up everything that went in the basket. When we had $20, that was it. We went home, finished or not. So it was very difficult the first a long time. First, I don't know, beginning. I remember, but gradually things certainly did get better. Howard, our first son, was born in New York City.
Lebanon Hospital.
Right, which was a very revolutionary hospital at the time. They had a program called Rooming In, where they had this little
bassinet
alcove, and the bassinet was in the same room with you, which was something that they certainly didn't do at that time. And so it was a very avant-garde at the time.
We were at the hospital. They had me downstairs waiting, and
oh, that was Stephen.
No, it was Lebanon Hospital, and they paged me, and I got very, very nervous. And the doctor says, they sent a message down. The doctor came down and he said, "Go home." He says it's going to take a long time. And I was walking around the hall, you know. He says you're going to wear a hole in the marble. So
we were there just a very short time in New York City after Howard was born. I think we moved to Bridgeport. He was 2.5.
Two and a half. Yeah.
About 2.5, and Joe was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut. You know, at that time, you stayed home. Most people stayed home with young children, and so I did. I had only worked a short time in Manhattan after I graduated, and when Howard was born. So we lived in Bridgeport 2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
2 years. 57 to 59.
And then we moved to Peoria, Illinois, where Stephen was born.
When we first moved, I remember going for an interview, and one of the things I said was, you know, is there a place to live? I mean, we have to move here. I have children. Oh, there's plenty of places. There's no problem. You can rent a place. There's nothing. Well, there was no place to live. We couldn't get a place to live. We had no money. Couldn't buy anything. And I was there 2 months, and I went up to see the president, and Yvette was still in Bridgeport, and I said, "I'm terribly sorry, but I have to resign. I have to leave." And he looked at me as if I was crazy. He said, "Why?" And I told him the story that I couldn't get a place to live. We had nowhere to live. We had no money. I couldn't buy anything.
And go buy a car.
You know, no, we had a car at that time. We had a car. And we had a car in Bridgeport. And they lent me $2,000 for the down payment on our house, which of course I paid them back. So
but without interest or anything like that, they just gave us the $2,000.
Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to stay there.
And I remember our first house cost $16,200. He was not very happy with the job. At that time, the way to advance was to move, was to get another job and at a higher position and salary.
Well, wait a minute. We were still in Peoria, and then we got Julie.
Yeah, but you know, he always wanted to. He was ready to move, but I was always pregnant. I was always going to give birth. I couldn't do that now. We have to wait till afterwards. So that's why. And of course, 3 years after Stephen was born, then we did get Julie. She was born in Lincoln, Nebraska.
And we had this opportunity. We got her through a Jewish agency.
We were very good friends with the social worker of this agency. And he suddenly called us up and said, "We have a baby girl, would you be interested?" So I said, "Of course, yeah, of course." You know, he gave us the background, and
we got her at a good price. She was on sale.
Yeah, she was on sale. And then, because of course, again, he was in New York. So I remember calling him, and I remember saying, "I don't want an answer. I want you to listen to what I have to say," because his first answer to everything is no. And so I stated my case, and then he said, "Well, okay, if you want to do this, we'll go ahead."
And we had a problem because she was so small.
Oh.
There was a medical problem, and she possibly had a heart problem, and we didn't know that. And we got all of her records. They sent us all of her records. And we had a fantastic pediatrician, and we gave him all the records, and he took the records to Chicago and took them to a pediatric heart doctor. And he said that he thought everything was fine. He thought that possibly just because she was so underweight, so small, that was the reason that there possibly was a heart murmur or something they didn't know. But he said that he thought everything was fine. And when we brought her home, this man was fantastic. He came to the house that night. We drove home, and he came to the house that night to examine her.
Then we moved to
Sterling.
To Sterling with our own store. It was a very small town. There was nothing happening. And fortunately, you know, I had 4 children at the time, and I was busy in the store. So I never really missed anything else because I didn't even have time for it. And then the store closed.
So Sterling was 28,000 people, a twin city, Sterling and Rock Falls.
It was 28 together.
Together.
But the two cities were together, 28. And my father came to live with us. He was ill at the time. He lived with us for about a year and a half. So I was really very busy. And then we moved back to Peoria for about 3 years after we closed the store.
The company I worked for offered me another position with them again. So we went back to Peoria for 3 years.
So I've often wondered whether all that moving back and forth, what that did to the children. Did it strengthen them? Did it give them more of a diverse background and have to adjust to different situations? It always broke my heart the first day of school when they had to go and they were the only newcomers, didn't know anybody, and that was really, really, really hard until they acclimated and became familiar with, with their surroundings and made friends. But for the two of us, we really are big city people. I really was not very happy in Sterling or in Peoria because there was nothing for me to do there. There was nothing creative for me. There was nothing artistic for me. There was no theater. There was none of the things that I truly enjoy doing. But because I was so busy, I didn't really miss it until after the kids were gone, and then it was really hard. But by that time, fortunately, we were in Phoenix. Each grandchild is a different kind of a relationship, When they were younger, Heather and Rachel used to come and stay with us, and so that helped a lot because Heather and Rachel's relationship is stronger than, say, Kayla and Ariel.
They're stronger with us. With
us, yes. And I've always regretted that, always, because I wanted a much more close relationship than we had with some of them when they were growing up. Even though as much as I think we tried to see each other a couple of times a year, it's not the same. It's just never the same. As much as we tried, it isn't the same relationship as 3 grandchildren that live in Phoenix, Stephen's children. There's a much closer relationship between those 3, and so we didn't have those kinds of experiences that you do have when you live in the same town and you can attend football games and dance recitals and things like that. It's just too hard to do, and that's too bad. That's just the way it is. Because we started so young, I think we developed along the same path. I think our thoughts are very, very similar. We see an issue or a problem, we see it in the same way. And so there's really never been a lot of dissension about major decisions. We've always...
we agree on buying houses.
We really do agree on a lot of things. Whether that was because we were so young and our opinions formed together, I don't know. But I think that had something to do with it. I really do, because a lot of the things that later on became important, we did see eye to eye. And so I think that was a major component. What else?
I think that, we're very, very fortunate. First of all, at this point, we still have our health. We can travel. We can do things together. We can, enjoy each other, enjoy our life, enjoy, our families. And we're very fortunate. I'm very, very fortunate because I kept on moving her around the country from one place to another. I mean, where did we wind up living? We moved from New York City to Peoria to Bridgeport, Connecticut, and in starvation. And when we lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut, it was declared a disaster area, a federal disaster area. So not the greatest place to live. Then we moved to Peoria, and we never had a lot of money. It took us a long time. We had always had children in school and in college and wherever, and we really have the same goals. We had the same goals all of our life. The first thing that was important, above all else, were the children, and everything we did was devoted, in terms of that. So, the fact that we never took vacations, the fact that we never did anything. Never went to a restaurant, or McDonald's was the big deal,
Hard. Yeah.
But so we just grew up together. We really grew up together. We were both.
We didn't really go diverse paths, or like some couples do. They reach a certain point and then they go separate ways. We certainly never did that.
I mean, I don't know how many couples can go to Palm Springs and sit on their tuchus and go for 10 days and look at 42 movies. And I tell people, how can you do that? And I said, it's very easy. When I come home, I go to a proctologist. So.
But even that's an example. We agree on the same movies. There's another couple that that are in the same hotel where we stay in Palm Springs, and they never go to the same movies together. You never see them together. You never see them doing the same things together. But we always seem to agree on the movie that we want to see, or the restaurant we want to go to, or whatever it is that is at hand at the time.
The only thing she won't let me do is buy a Cadillac.
Is that terrible? That's just so sad.
I'm so deprived in my life. So.
That's a real sad thing.
So.